Minister, thank you very much for joining us on Bloomberg Television. New budget, new targets. 2.6% is the estimate for GDP growth in 2019. The private sector is, of course, a key component of Vision 2030. Talk me through what you want to do in 2019 to help boost the private sector.
So first of all our programs, vision-related programs, have a private sector component, not only to invest capital, but also to promote some of their core industries. So that's one aspect of how are we going to spend in 2019. Vision-related programs, initiatives. So take the industrial program, for example. It's all about core industries. How can the Saudi government invest in some regions where there is a competitive advantage related to convertible energies, related to alternatives, related to petrochemicals, and so on and so forth. So that's one. The second, we do have in 2019 a stimulus package, financial and regulatorily. So that also is going to be part to stimulate the private sector. Plus the business as usual, which is again the spending on core infrastructure projects.
I mean, we've been talking to a lot of people in the private sector, and they've been struggling with some of the expat levies. You have been in touch with a lot of investors as well. Is it time to recalibrate some of these expat levies in 2019?
So we get mixed feedback so far about expat levy. I think the position today is business as usual. We're sticking to our position. However, I just mentioned the stimulus package. If there is a sector or an industry or a specific private sector need to either promote the balance of payment, create jobs for Saudis or other criteria that we have set up before, then we are willing to look at some of these fees.
And then when you look at the reform program as a whole, the phasing out of subsidies is of course an integral component of that. I mean, what's the timeline like right now? I mean, what are we going to see in 2019 in terms of the phasing out of subsidies?
So again, everything you've asked about has been announced initially through the fiscal budget program. So there should be no surprise for the private sector or the pace of energy price reforms. But I go back to the same point. Whenever there is a reason of revision to either promote one of our strategic objectives, job creation, enhance the balance of payment, then the government is too willing to take a look at this.
So nothing's changed then in terms of what comes next in the energy segment as well, because you had pushed back some of the plans last year when we spoke.
Equally, we've introduced the citizen account, the one-off cost of living initiative by the custodian of the two holy mosques. I'm talking about the stimulus packages of the private sector. I think if you look at it from a balance point of view, yes, there is some disadvantage of energy price reform to some of the private sector, but also there is these massive investments and projects in the pipeline.
I want to talk a little bit about privatization, because that's been going a little bit slow.
Yes.
It's an issue where global markets don't offer favorable conditions. So this is not just a challenge Saudi Arabia is facing, we're seeing that in other parts of the world. But are you still willing to push ahead in 2019 with some of your privatization?
Oh, definitely. Last time we talked about the readiness of the program, and I think in terms of readiness, including the prerequisites, regulations, the PPP law, inclusion in the MSCI, FTSE, all of this is out of the way, behind us. So in terms of the opportunities themselves, we have identified 5 sectors where we studied the private sector appetite for those, and it's there. So yes, the answer is yes, we're going ahead, and I think 2019 will witness some of those opportunities coming to the market.
How many companies?
Well, we're talking about 7 initially in the first quarter. For the whole year, it's going to be around 19.
Then when you look at some of the FDI figures,
yes.
You were just talking about this in a panel
yes.
as well. It increased 110% in 2018 to 13 billion Saudi riyals. It's a base that you're growing from. Saudi Arabia is opening up to the world. What does the target become in 2019? What do you think you can do?
We'd rather focus on the quality, focus on sustainability, focus on technology transfer, focus on job creation in Saudi Arabia, and focus on long-term investments of FDI rather than looking at a very specific figure that is volatile and change with time. So the idea is to make sure that the private sector we attract through our strategic partnership initiative satisfy those criteria.
And if you had to put a number out in terms of a wish list, I mean, where would you see it grow to?
Well, to be honest, our focus is on local private sector because we think they have a huge potential to grow regionally and some of them even globally. But also we determined a strategic partnership criteria for nations, and we're in active dialogue with those nations in their private sector to specific projects, again, to promote our initiatives, competitive advantage, having Saudi Arabia as a logistical hub, and so on and so forth. All vision-related programs.
The murder of Jamal Khashoggi had an impact on appetite from foreign investors. What is your message to them, anybody out there who is still nervous putting money to work in
I
the
think
kingdom?
Historically Saudi Arabia institutional credibility is still valid. If you look at our credit history, we're one of the best in the world. If you look at our financial system, regulations, openness, if you look at our transparency recently and how we approach information and sharing, if you look at the opportunities themselves that are represented in Saudi Arabia, are still valid, very competitive and appealing. I think those commercially will ultimately be what the private sector is looking for.
We've been speaking to quite a few contractors and they are still facing payment issues. We understand that the Ministry of Finance is working through some of that backlog. And I'd like you to weigh in here as from your point of view as the Ministry of Economy. I mean, is that a problem for you?
No, it's not a problem. We're actually doing a lot to support the Ministry of Finance to pay everything. I know their track record for 2018 was significant. It's north of 99% in terms of payments on time. However, we do realize we're dealing with residuals from the past. There are situations where there is disputes between some contractors and the government, and this has to take its course to be resolved. From the Ministry of Economy and Planning, we're pushing for everybody to get paid and move on.
The oil price is collapsing as we speak. Pressure tremendously over the last 3 months. 2019, how worried are you that that could have an impact on what you want to do in 2019?
I think we've said last year that Saudi Arabia is looking at its budgets and its scenario base rather than looking at a specific price that's determined by the demand and supply. We do have a lot of scenarios to deal with. We're very comfortable with the level of reserves. The central bank, we're very comfortable with the dividend yield, our sovereign wealth funds and other investment vehicles. We're also very comfortable with the cost-saving initiatives through the Cost Rationalization Bureau. So all of these in mind, I think, give us a lot of comfort, regardless to where the oil price is.
And closing thought, are you most keen on for the new year? I mean, I think there's a lot of upside as you look for opportunities.
I think the industrial program is massive. It is around 40% of GDP if you look at it holistically. This is to promote Saudi industrial capacity, promoting the infrastructure to attract FDI. So a big push for this program because it's boxes.